I used to believe betrayal came with noise, a raised voice, a slammed door, something dramatic enough to justify the pain. I was wrong. Betrayal came quietly, wrapped in silence, filtered through unread messages, disguised as negative energy. And years later, it walked into my conference room wearing a company badge and sat across from me. I'm telling this story now not because I'm still angry. I'm not. But because for a long time, I didn't realize how slowly a relationship can rot when it's built on convenience instead of care. For years, I paid for my best friend's life, not because she asked outright, not because she demanded it, but because I could, and because I believed that loyalty meant showing up, even when the balance wasn't fair. I covered dinners, drinks, concert tickets, late night rides home. Don't worry about it, I'd say, smiling, swiping my card like it was nothing. And she let me. Then the day came when I couldn't anymore. I lost my job in a single afternoon, called into a glass conference room, handed a stack of papers, and given 90 minutes to pack up a version of myself I thought was permanent. I didn't announce it. I didn't cry on her shoulder. I didn't ask for help. I just stopped paying. That's when she disappeared. No fight, no confrontation, just delayed replies. Then silence. Then I heard, through someone else, that I had become negative energy. Years of history reduced to a label. I grieved that friendship quietly while rebuilding my life from scratch, rewriting resumes, counting grocery money, wondering how I'd been so blind for so long. And just when I thought the chapter was closed, I got hired at her dream company, the place she'd obsessed over for years, the company she said would change everything if she ever got in. I didn't know she worked there. Not until my second day. Not until she walked into my meeting room. Not until our eyes met and the power dynamic flipped so hard it knocked the air out of both of us. I didn't seek revenge. I didn't plan anything. But what followed next would reveal exactly who she was when she could no longer use me, and how far someone will go when entitlement replaces gratitude. This isn't a story about winning. It's a story about what people do when they think you've fallen, and how they react when you stand back up stronger than ever. My name is Maddie Harper, and I was 29 when my friendship with Annie cracked for good, though the truth is, it started splintering long before I noticed the sound. If you'd asked me at 19 what Annie meant to me, I would have answered without hesitation. Family. The kind you choose. The kind that shows up when your blood relatives can't, or won't. We met the way a lot of forever friendships begin, by accident, in a place that felt temporary. It was a campus food drive during freshman year, the kind where everyone pretends they have time, and then reality hits. Boxes are heavier than they look, volunteers vanish the moment the photo op ends, and the organizers are left sweating through their shirts under fluorescent lights. Annie and I were the ones who stayed. She was all sharp angles back then. Thin ponytail, chipped nail polish, a mouth that moved fast like she was always a half step ahead of her own anxiety. I remember her trying to lift a donation box alone, the cardboard bowing at the bottom. I stepped in without thinking. Careful, I said, it's about to rip. She shot me a look like she didn't like being helped. Then she sighed. Yeah, story of my life. That was Annie, defensive first, honest second. We ended up assigned together every Tuesday afternoon, sorting canned goods, labeling boxes, stacking them like we were building a fortress against hunger. We were both exhausted all the time. Minimum wage jobs, full course loads, laundry that never got folded, coffee that tasted like desperation. By the third week, Annie nudged me with her elbow and said, "You hungry?" Always. She suggested the corner deli because neither of us could afford the dining hall meal plan. That's how our ritual started. A $6 sandwich cut in half, eaten slowly like we were stretching more than food, stretching hope, stretching stamina. We'd refill our water bottles at the fountain, laugh about how we were basically wellness queens because we couldn't afford soda. Sometimes, if we had a good weekend shift and our tips weren't completely tragic, we'd pool them for a bottle of cheap wine from the liquor store on 4th Street. We'd sit on the floor in her dorm or mine, legs crossed, like kids playing pretend at adulthood, and talk about what life would look like after graduation. Annie always talked big. I'm going to be in marketing, she said once, waving her plastic cup like a champagne flute. Like real marketing, big firms downtown. I'm not doing this broke thing forever. I believed her. Not because I thought she was destined for greatness in some magical way, but because she sounded like she needed to believe it, and I understood that feeling. I was studying business administration, telling myself I just wanted something corporate, stable, Predictable. A paycheck that didn't require me to calculate rent in my head at 2 a.m. We were the same kind of tired, the same kind of hungry, the same kind of determined. And when you're 19 and drowning, anyone who can tread water beside you feels like a soulmate. We didn't have family money. We didn't have safety nets. We had each other. When my roommate situation imploded junior year, one of those slow, ugly breakups where passive aggression turns into locked doors and missing food, I called Annie at midnight and whispered, "Can I come over?" She didn't even hesitate. "Yeah, bring your stuff." I slept on her floor for 3 weeks. My back hurt every morning. Annie complained about my hair being everywhere. I complained about her alarm going off 6 times. We fought over nothing and made up 10 minutes later because, honestly, we didn't have the luxury of pride. Then there was the night Annie got food poisoning, the night before her final presentation. I remember her sitting on the bathroom tile, forehead against the tub, shaking like the world was too heavy to carry. "I'm gonna fail," she croaked. "You're not," I said, rubbing her back, trying not to panic. "You're gonna get through tonight, and you're gonna present tomorrow." I stayed up with her, timing sips of water, holding her hair back, then helping her rehearse at 6 in the morning while her voice was raw and her eyes were bruised from no sleep. When she finished the presentation later that day, she texted me one word: "Passed." And I remember smiling so hard my face hurt. That's why, years later, when things started shifting, I didn't want to believe it. Because in my head, the bond was built on those moments: cardboard boxes, deli sandwiches, dorm room wine, bathroom tiles, and late-night rescue missions. It felt impossible that something that solid could turn into something transactional. But after graduation, life accelerates, and some people don't grow. They just upgrade what they take. The first thing people don't tell you about adulthood is how fast roles solidify. Not with announcements, not with conversations, just with repetition. After graduation, the distance between Annie and me didn't happen all at once. It crept in quietly, dressed up as circumstances. I got hired at a mid-sized consulting firm about 2 months after we walked across the stage. The job wasn't glamorous, but the salary felt unreal to me at the time. For the first time, I could buy groceries without staring at my banking app like it might scold me. Annie was still searching. She applied everywhere, at least that's what she told me. She'd send me screenshots of rejection emails, punctuated with comments like, "Guess I'm just invisible," or "They don't want people without connections." I tried to help, I really did. I forwarded every posting I saw. I offered to review her resume, over and over. I practiced interview questions with her at my kitchen table while we ate pasta that came from a box. After 4 months, she landed a retail management job. The pay was bad, the hours were worse, and she complained about it constantly. I listened, because that's what I had always done. Around that same time, I got my first promotion. Nothing huge, but enough that I could breathe. Enough that saving money stopped feeling like a fantasy. Enough that, when Annie and I went out, I didn't have to calculate every choice. So the first time she reached for her wallet and I said, "I've got it," it felt natural. Just coffee, then dinner, then drinks, then concert tickets she really wanted to see. At first, she'd smile and say, "Next one's on me." It never was. Eventually, she stopped pretending. She didn't even reach for her bag anymore. She'd just look at me when the check came, eyebrows slightly raised, like the outcome was already decided. And I let it be. I told myself I owed her. She'd been there during the hard years. She listened when I cried about work stress. She talked me through 2 ugly breakups. Money felt small compared to that. So the rhythm set in. I'd suggest a place. We'd go. I'd pay. She'd thank me, sometimes sincerely, sometimes distracted. What I didn't notice at first was how selective our time together had become. If I suggested something free, a walk, a movie night at home, coffee at my place, she'd suddenly be busy. But when I mentioned a new restaurant or tickets to something trendy, her schedule magically opened up. She started posting photos from those outings. Perfect lighting, pretty cocktails, expensive entrees. She never tagged me. I never asked why. The imbalance lasted 3 years. 3 years of me picking up checks without thinking. 3 years of telling myself this was what friendship looked like now, supporting the people who were still finding their footing. And then my company announced restructuring. They called it downsizing. I called it the moment my stomach dropped through the floor. I was sitting at my desk halfway through a report when my manager tapped my shoulder and said, "Can you come with me?" The conference room had 2 HR reps waiting. Polite, scripted, efficient. They slid papers across the table. Severance, timelines, next steps. I had 90 minutes to pack my desk. I remember putting my framed photo in the box first, then my notebooks, then the tiny succulent I kept by my monitor like it was proof I could keep something alive. At 3 p.m. on a Wednesday, I walked out carrying that box. I didn't tell anyone that day. Not my parents, not my friends, and definitely not Annie. Part of me was embarrassed. I had been the stable one for so long, the one with answers, the one with a card that never declined. Admitting I'd been laid off felt like admitting I'd been pretending. So instead of saying anything, I changed my behavior. Subtly, instead of restaurants, I suggested walks in the park near her apartment. Instead of Sunday brunch that cost $40 a plate, I suggested bagels from the cheap place on the corner. That's when Annie started pulling away. Slow replies, short messages, no more suggestions to hang out. I didn't connect the dots at first. I thought she was tired, busy, stressed. I told myself everything was fine. But when support only flows one way, the silence speaks louder than words. By the 6th week of unemployment, I was living in a strange limbo. My days were filled with applications, follow-up emails, interview prep, and that quiet dread that creeps in when rejection starts to feel personal. My nights were silent in a way I wasn't used to. No plans, no texts lighting up my phone, no Annie calling to vent about her job or suggest somewhere new to eat. I hadn't told her about the layoff, but I hadn't lied either. I'd just stopped funding the version of our friendship that required money to exist. One Saturday morning, I texted her, "Farmer's market near your place today. Want to walk around?" Hours passed. Finally, a reply. "Busy." No explanation, no emoji, just one word. I tried again the next weekend. She said she'd let me know. She never did. The messages grew colder. I'd send something light, an inside joke, a meme, a "how was your week?" And it would sit there, unopened, or read without response. When she did reply, it was a thumbs up, a single word. Nothing to build on. It felt like trying to have a conversation with a wall. I kept telling myself I was being paranoid, that job loss messes with your head, that I was projecting my own fear of instability onto her distance. Then, one afternoon, the truth slipped out by accident. I ran into a girl we both knew from college at the grocery store. One of those people you recognize instantly but haven't spoken to in years. We did the polite catching up dance between the produce aisle and the frozen foods. And then she said it, casually, carelessly. "Oh," she laughed. "By the way, Annie's been saying you've been kind of bringing everyone down lately. Negative energy." I felt my chest tighten, like someone had wrapped a band around my ribs and pulled. "Negative?" I repeated. She shrugged. "Yeah, I think she just means you've been off lately." She said it like it was nothing, like gossip, like it wasn't about me. I nodded, smiled, finished my shopping on autopilot. The moment I got home, I sat on my couch and scrolled through my messages with Annie. I reread everything. Every text, every response, every silence. I searched for complaints, for bitterness, for anything that could be twisted into negativity. There was nothing. I hadn't told her I was struggling. I hadn't vented about interviews. I hadn't asked for help. The only thing that had changed was money. That realization settled into me slowly, heavily. I replayed the last few years like a montage I couldn't turn off. Every check I'd grabbed without thinking. Every ticket I bought for both of us. Every ride share I paid for when it was late and she didn't want to take the bus. Every time she stopped suggesting plans unless I was planning and paying. Every time she posted photos from expensive dinners with other people while telling me she was too busy to grab a free coffee. The pattern snapped into focus so clearly it made me nauseous. Still, I wasn't ready to let go. I told myself friendships deserve one honest test. So I texted her, "Coffee this week? Just the place near your work." She agreed. That Thursday, I arrived early and ordered my own drink. I chose a small table by the window and tried to slow my breathing. When Annie walked in, she looked exactly the same. Polished, distracted, scanning the room like she was already thinking about where she needed to be next. She ordered her coffee, then paused. She looked at me, waited. I didn't move. She hesitated for half a second longer than normal, then pulled out her card and paid. We sat down. The conversation was painfully forced. I asked about her job. She answered without detail. I mentioned a show we used to love. She nodded while scrolling on her phone. After 30 minutes, she stood. "I should go," she said. No suggestion to do this again. No hug, no warmth. She walked out, and I watched her leave like I was watching the final scene of something that had already ended. That was the last time we spent time together. By the 3rd month of unemployment, we weren't talking at all. And in the silence she left behind, I started rebuilding my life, piece by piece, without realizing that fate was already setting the stage for one final, brutal reunion. Losing Annie didn't feel like a breakup. There was no dramatic ending, no argument to replay, no final message to analyze. It felt more like waking up one morning and realizing a room you'd been living in was empty, and had been for a while. At first, I blamed myself. That's what women like me do. We audit our behavior. We replay conversations. We ask what we could have said differently, softer, better. I wondered if I should have told her about the layoff sooner, if my silence came off as distant, if I'd unknowingly shifted the energy she was talking about. I lay awake at night, staring at my ceiling, running mental spreadsheets of guilt. Maybe I should have been more upbeat. Maybe she thought I didn't trust her. Maybe friendship means being honest about struggle, not hiding it. But the deeper I went, the more the math stopped adding up. Because honesty goes both ways. And Annie hadn't asked if I was okay. Not once. She hadn't checked in. She hadn't noticed. She hadn't cared. At least not enough to stay when I stopped being useful. That truth hurt more than the silence. Still, I didn't confront her. I didn't call her out. I didn't demand explanations. I didn't send the long, emotional text I drafted and deleted at least 10 times. Part of me didn't want confirmation. Another part already had it. So I focused on survival. I applied to everything remotely relevant. I rewrote my resume until the words felt meaningless. I tracked applications in a spreadsheet. I practiced interview answers out loud in my kitchen, talking to no one. My savings shrank. I canceled subscriptions. I stopped going out. I bought cheaper groceries and learned which brand of pasta tasted least like regret. Every rejection email felt personal. We've decided to move forward with other candidates. Each one chipped away at the version of myself that believed stability was permanent. But then, just when I was bracing myself for more disappointment, I got a call. A number I didn't recognize. The woman on the other end introduced herself calmly, professionally. She was calling about a project management role I'd applied for weeks earlier at a company called Summit Solutions. My stomach flipped. Summit Solutions wasn't just any company. It was Annie's company, the one she'd talked about endlessly back in college, the one she followed on every platform, the one she had screenshots of saved on her laptop, office views, benefits packages, employee testimonials. Her dream. I'd applied without thinking. At that point, I was applying everywhere. I didn't connect the dots. Didn't even know she worked there. The interviews moved fast. 3 rounds. Detailed questions. Real interest. When they offered me the job, the salary was better than my last one. The responsibility higher. The opportunity real. I accepted. I didn't tell Annie. Not out of spite. Not out of secrecy. We hadn't spoken in months. I assumed she'd moved on. I assumed I had too. 2 weeks later, on my second day at Summit Solutions, I walked into a conference room early to lead my first kickoff meeting. I set up my laptop, reviewed my notes, smoothed my blazer. One by one, my team members arrived. Then she walked in. Annie froze in the doorway when she saw me. Her face drained of color. Her eyes darted from me to the room to me again, like she was trying to rewrite reality in real time. She didn't say a word. She sat as far from me as possible and stared at her laptop like it might save her. And in that moment, something shifted inside me. Not triumph, not revenge. Clarity. Because now, finally, there was nowhere for the imbalance to hide. The first week after that meeting felt unreal. Not dramatic, not explosive, just tense in a way that sat under the skin. Annie arrived to every meeting exactly on time. She never looked at me directly. She chose the seat farthest away, angled her laptop so no one could see her screen, and spoke only when a question was directed at her. Brief, clipped answers, then silence. Outside of meetings, she avoided me completely. If I walked past her desk, she suddenly became absorbed in her screen. If I entered the kitchen, she'd leave. If we crossed paths in the hallway, she'd pretend to be on her phone. I didn't chase her. The friendship was already dead. All that remained was work. And at first, I told myself that was enough. But as the project moved forward, a pattern emerged. One that wasn't just awkward, it was disruptive. Everyone else on the team checked in regularly. They asked clarifying questions. They sent drafts early. They flagged risks before they became problems. Annie didn't. She submitted her work at the last possible minute, sometimes late. When I followed up, her responses were 1 line long. Working on it. Sent. See folder. No context, no explanation, no collaboration. When files appeared in the shared drive, they were dropped there without notes, without summaries, without any indication of what had changed or what still needed work. In meetings, she said nothing unless I directly addressed her. Arms crossed, posture closed, energy withdrawn. The rest of the team noticed. One afternoon, a colleague pulled me aside quietly and asked, "Is Annie okay? She seems checked out." Another mentioned she hadn't responded in the team chat for 2 days. I didn't defend her. I didn't criticize her. I documented everything. Dates, deadlines, messages, missed follow-ups. I kept my tone neutral in every email. Clear, professional, impossible to misinterpret. That's when the outside pressure started. Mutual friends from college reached out. They said Annie felt blindsided, that it was unfair I hadn't told her about the job, that she'd been applying to Summit Solutions for years, and I should have warned her about my own life. I didn't explain myself. I didn't tell them she'd vanished when I lost my job. I didn't mention the money, the silence, the way she'd labeled me negative and disappeared. I simply said, we weren't in contact, and I didn't think my employment decisions required an announcement. Some of those friends stopped talking to me after that. Others saw through it. One quietly pointed out that Annie had been posting photos from expensive restaurants and weekend trips the entire time she was supposedly too busy to meet me. Another admitted Annie had a pattern, getting close to people when it benefited her, then pulling away when it didn't. The friend group split. Group chats became tense. Plans became selective. Invitations quietly stopped, including both of us. And then came the first client presentation. I'd sent the template 2 weeks in advance. Everyone submitted on time, except Annie. I followed up once, then twice, then a third time. She sent her slides the morning of the presentation. At noon, I opened the deck to review it. Her section was unfinished. Placeholder text, blank charts, notes in the margins that read, add numbers here and find source. My hands went cold. I called her. No answer. I messaged her urgently. She replied an hour later. Thought the presentation was next week. It was in 1 hour. I rebuilt her entire section in 40 minutes. Pulled data, created charts, wrote explanations. When the client call started, I presented her work. Annie joined 2 minutes late, stayed on mute the entire time. After the call, I asked to talk. She said she had another meeting. She never followed up. That night, I sat at my desk long after the office emptied, staring at my notes, and something inside me hardened, not into anger, but resolve. This wasn't passive. This wasn't misunderstanding. This was sabotage, and I wasn't going to let it continue quietly. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from holding yourself together while someone else is actively trying to pull you apart. By the time the project hit its midpoint, I was carrying more than work. I was carrying tension into my shoulders, into my sleep, into the way my jaw stayed clenched even when I was alone. Annie's behavior didn't improve after that first presentation. It escalated. She started missing team meetings entirely. No warning, no explanation. I'd wait 5 minutes, then 10, then move on because the rest of the team was there and ready. Hours later, a message would arrive. Had it on my calendar wrong. Another commitment came up. Every excuse sounded thin, rehearsed. Then I noticed something worse. She began leaving me off email chains. I'd find out decisions had been discussed without me. Questions had been asked and answered that I'd already covered in detail in previous emails. Work was duplicated. Instructions conflicted. Confusion spread. Exactly the kind of chaos that makes a project lead look incompetent. One afternoon, a senior manager pulled me aside after a department meeting. He spoke carefully. Annie mentioned there might be some communication issues on your project, he said, that she's not always clear on direction. My stomach dropped. I didn't react defensively. I didn't argue. I opened my folder. I showed him the emails, clear instructions, timelines, follow-ups, the meeting notes, the reminders, the unanswered messages. He read quietly. Then he nodded. I see, he said. Keep documenting. Let me know if this escalates. It did. One morning, I opened the team's shared drive and froze. Several key files were gone. Files I knew had been there the day before. I checked the version history. They'd been deleted at 11:07 p.m. the night before. By Annie. My hands shook as I restored them from backup. I messaged her, asking why the files had been removed. Accident, she replied. 2 nights later, it happened again. Different files, same timing, same account. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying everything, from the deli sandwiches to the unread messages to the conference room where she'd first seen me as her boss. I asked myself the question I'd been avoiding. Was this my fault? Had I somehow earned this by not warning her? By not shrinking myself? By surviving when she hadn't? The answer didn't bring comfort, because the truth was darker than guilt. She wasn't confused. She wasn't hurt. She was angry that the dynamic had flipped, and she was trying to punish me for it. The final blow came quietly. A mutual friend sent me screenshots from a private group chat. I hadn't asked for them. They thought I should know. Annie was venting about me. She said I'd stolen her dream job, that I must have applied to Summit Solutions because I knew how much it meant to her, that I was incompetent, lucky, and clearly trying to set her up to fail out of revenge. I stared at my phone, numb. I didn't respond. I didn't defend myself. I didn't forward the screenshots. I closed the app and sat there in the dark, feeling something finally give way inside me. This was the lowest point, not because of what she was doing, but because I realized she would never stop on her own. And if I didn't act, she would burn the project and take me with it. The second major client presentation was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon. Bigger client, higher stakes, more eyes on the project. I sent the deliverables list 3 weeks in advance. Each task was clearly assigned, each deadline clearly stated. I followed up the way a responsible project lead does. Calm reminders, open channels, written summaries. Everyone responded. Everyone, except Annie. A week before the presentation, I asked for a draft of her section. Working on it, she replied. 3 days before, I asked again. I'll send it tonight. She didn't. The day before the presentation, I sent one final message. I need your materials by end of day to finalize the deck. At 8:07 p.m., a file appeared in my inbox. I opened it. Nothing. The file was corrupted. Wouldn't load. Wouldn't open in any program. No preview. No data. I messaged her immediately. The file won't open. Can you resend? No response. I sat at my desk, staring at the blank screen, feeling something click into place. Not rage, not panic. Acceptance. I stayed up until 2 a.m. rebuilding her entire section from scratch. Pulled data from archived notes. Recreated charts. Wrote explanations she should have provided weeks earlier. When the presentation began the next day, it went smoothly. Too smoothly. The client was satisfied. My manager complimented the team. Annie stayed silent on mute the entire time. After the call, I didn't confront her. I went to HR. I brought everything. The timelines, the missed deadlines, the deleted files, the metadata proving the corrupted file had never been properly saved. I didn't speculate. I didn't accuse. I presented facts. HR listened. They scheduled interviews with the rest of the team, reviewed the project history, pulled Annie's internal records. 2 weeks later, they called me in. Their conclusion was clear. There were performance issues. There was a pattern. There was documentation. Annie was removed from my project and placed on a performance improvement plan. After that, she stopped coming into the office. She worked from home full-time, cameras off, voice flat, minimal participation. A month later, her name disappeared from the company directory. I didn't ask why. I didn't celebrate. I just exhaled, because the truth was simple and brutal. I hadn't taken anything from her. She lost it herself. The aftermath didn't arrive with fireworks. It came in fragments. Annie's exit from this company didn't make an announcement. No goodbye email. No farewell post. One day her name was still in the directory. The next day it wasn't. The office absorbed the absence the way it always does. Quietly, efficiently, without sentiment. But outside of work, the ripple effects were louder. The friend group fractured completely. About half of the people we'd once shared inside jokes and birthday dinners with stopped talking to me. They said I'd gotten Annie fired, that I'd been cold, vindictive, that I should have protected her instead of documenting her behavior. They didn't ask questions. They didn't want context. They wanted a villain, and I fit more neatly than the truth. The others drifted away from both of us, not out of judgment, but exhaustion. Drama is heavy, and most people don't want to carry it when they don't have to. A few friends reached out quietly. They said they'd seen this pattern before, that Annie had latched onto people when they were useful, then turned sharp when they weren't, that someone else had been burned years earlier, but no one had spoken up because it was easier to let the story fade. I didn't defend myself publicly. I didn't release screenshots. I didn't explain HR processes. I didn't correct narratives. I let people believe what they needed to believe. Annie's social media, on the other hand, became louder. Vague posts about fake friends, about corporate politics, about people who steal opportunities and sabotage others. She never used my name. She didn't have to. 2 months after she left the company, she texted me. It was late on a Sunday night. Hey, want to grab lunch sometime? We should catch up. The message was written like nothing had happened, like years of imbalance, silence, sabotage, and accusation had simply evaporated. I stared at my phone for a long time. Then I replied, I don't think that's a good idea. No explanation, no emotional footnotes, just a boundary. She responded immediately, a long message. She said I was being unfair, that she'd been trying to apologize, that I was holding on to anger and preventing her from healing, that I was punishing her by refusing to let her make things right. I didn't reply. The next day, screenshots started circulating again. She'd posted in the group chat about how she'd extended an olive branch and I'd thrown it back in her face, how it proved I'd never really cared about the friendship, how she was done trying. People argued, took sides, rehashed old wounds. I wasn't in the chat anymore. I didn't ask to be added back. Instead, I did something quiet. I deleted the photos, the college pictures, the restaurant selfies, the concert nights, the moments I'd once thought meant mutual care. I didn't delete them out of anger. I deleted them because holding on to them felt like honoring a version of the relationship that had never truly existed. Months later, I heard Annie had left marketing entirely. She was working for a nonprofit now, community outreach, someone said. I nodded, wished her well in my head, let the information pass through me without sticking. I'd been promoted 4 months earlier. The project I'd led, the one she tried to sink, had finished successfully. My manager cited it as a key reason for moving me up. I had a bigger team now, more responsibility, more peace. The last time I saw Annie was at a wedding. A mutual friend from college, someone neither of us was especially close to anymore, but close enough that an invitation still made sense. I hesitated before going. I knew there was a chance she'd be there. I went anyway. We didn't sit near each other during the ceremony. I noticed her across the aisle once, same posture, same careful polish. But there was no jolt of emotion when our eyes met, just recognition. At the reception, during cocktail hour, we ended up near the same table by accident. She walked over. She hugged me. Quick, awkward, like we were co-workers who used to share an office but didn't anymore. How are you? She asked. I'm fine, I said. She said she was doing well too. We stood there for a few seconds, the space between us filled with everything we weren't going to say. Then someone else joined the conversation, and I walked away. That was it. No confrontation, no closure speech, no apology, just acknowledgement and release. I don't think about Annie much anymore. Sometimes a memory floats up, splitting a sandwich, laughing on a dorm room floor, dreaming out loud about the future. When that happens, I don't push it away. I let it exist for what it was, a moment that mattered, even if it didn't last. Not all relationships are meant to be permanent. Some are meant to teach you what generosity looks like and what it costs when it's not reciprocated. I learned that support isn't measured by how much you give, but by what happens when you can't anymore. I learned that people who love you don't disappear when your circumstances change. And I learned that walking away quietly can be more powerful than proving your side ever could be. I kept going. She kept going. We both moved forward. Just not together. And that, finally, felt like I also felt measured.